All right, so we are back for episode 3. This is our bloodiest of episodes of our Bloody Holiday Day series. Finally got Jimmy, who is Michelle's husband, on. You have not heard him on this podcast yet because he was very particular about which movie he came on for. So we had to throw Die Hard into here. So this movie came out 35 years ago. Jimmy, can you please share what your first memories of seeing this movie are?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know this, but while this movie takes place during Christmas, it didn't come out during Christmas. It actually came out over the summer. And the first time I saw it, I was 8 years old, and I was living with my parents, obviously, and they would have movie night rental. They go to Blockbuster Video. Actually, I think they probably went to the local town video because I don't even know the Blockbuster was that big of a thing yet. And they'd rent whatever the hot movie was, and I think so I probably watched this in the middle of January, sometime in 1989 when this first came out. Parents would put me to bed, and then they'd go watch their R-rated movie downstairs or their PG-13. I don't think PG-13 existed, but anyway, they'd go watch their adult movie that I wasn't supposed to watch. And I would routinely sneak down the stairs, and this is one of the movies that I very vividly remember being one of the first adult movies that I watched, peering from behind the couch as they watched this movie. And I remember really enjoying it and not having seen anything like it before. So that's the first memory I have of watching this movie. Probably don't show it to your 8-year-old, but
Yeah, probably not.
I think there's also maybe like 150 F-bombs in the movie at some point.
Couple boobs here and there, but that's okay. I cannot believe that this movie didn't come out over Christmas because it's so. I know that it's like that ongoing joke of, people like to make it their personality trait. This is their favorite Christmas movie, but there's so much holiday music in it. Even the actors like humming throughout. All of them are just humming holiday songs. So it feels weird. I can't imagine going to see this in the movies like in the middle of the summer. Well, I guess Christmas in July. Like,
Yeah, it
it would
does
be a
seem
little fun little twist, but yeah, feels
There's
off.
always the debate, is this a Christmas movie? Is it not a Christmas movie? I kind of fall on it's definitely a Christmas movie. It's got a lot of Christmas themes throughout, but the one argument against, I guess, would be the fact that it didn't come out around Christmas, which is weird for a Christmas movie.
Yeah. Did you feel like after that you ended up watching this a lot around Christmas as kind of a tradition, or did you end up just watching it whenever you wanted to?
Yeah, this movie and Die Hard 2, I can't tell you that I specifically watched it around Christmas traditionally, but they were on TBS, TNT, whatever the, cable channel of the week was, with a million bleep outs in each one. And I mean, I've probably seen this movie close to 100 times because it's just on TV all the time before, you had whatever movie you wanted to get on your streaming platform. You could always turn on TV and find Die Hard or Die Hard 2.
Well, Michelle, you were a little bit younger at the time, but even if you weren't, I find it hard to believe that you would have watched this in your childhood with the guardrails that we grew up with. So, do you have any specific memories of seeing this?
No, I definitely was not sneaking downstairs to watch this movie. I'm curious if mom and dad have ever even seen this movie. I don't remember it ever being brought up in our childhood. Not that I feel like, Jimmy, that your mom and dad are like huge movie people or that I would guess that they would rent Die Hard, but get that as like young parents. That's what you do on like a Friday night or whatever. You go to the video store. No, I hadn't seen this movie at all until I met Jimmy. And when Jimmy and I first started dating, I remember there being 3 movie franchises that he loved and still loves today that I had never seen any of the movies. And those are the Die Hard movies, the Lethal Weapon movies, and the Beverly Hills Cop movies.
Pre-Die Hard 4.
Yeah, but this is before Die Hard 4 came out after we started dating. So the I guess it was just a trilogy at that point. But I would say of all of those, Beverly Hills Cop is still my favorite of them, but Die Hard is right up there I think even after watching Die Hard 1 the first time, I thought that it was great, but it's still not my favorite genre of movie. I think Jimmy really likes action comedies like way more than I do. I'm more, obviously, if you've listened to this podcast, you know me and Laura are much more of like romantic comedies or just regular comedies. Yeah, I don't have like a specific memory of you showing it to me, but I'm positive that you were the one who introduced it to me. And then we watched Die Hard 2 and Die Hard 3 as well. We saw Die Hard 4 in the movies together. I remember that. And that was July 4th when that came out. And the movie takes place on July 4th weekend. Most very recently, since we knew we had this podcast coming out, we watched Die Hard together and we're like, maybe do we want to watch the second one? So then the next night we watched Die Hard 2, and then the next night we watched Die Hard 3, and we watched Die Hard 4 last night. We have still not watched Die Hard 5, but probably will in the next couple of days.
Oh my God, there's a fifth one? I didn't even know. I didn't even know there was a second or a third. So
we actually didn't know there was a fifth one either.
Yeah.
Is Bruce in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. He's still kicking.
It's in Moscow.
Yeah, the fourth one, his daughter is in, and the fifth one, supposedly, his son is in. And his wife is in the second one, and none of them are in the third one. But I just want to say, after watching the four of them in a row, I think that Die Hard 3 is the most underrated. I thought it was extremely entertaining, really funny, like the most comedic of all of them, in my opinion. Because it maybe doesn't feel super die-hardy, like I think that anyone could be in it. It doesn't have to be Bruce Willis. And because it's like the third in a series, it kind of is like maybe gets lost, but highly recommend it as a standalone movie.
Where does that one take place?
In New York. And Samuel L. Jackson is kind of his partner in it. Reluctant partner.
Okay, I see.
Jesus. Actually, just Zeus.
Just Zeus.
I think it's interesting that we categorize this as action comedy, because just doing my research before this recording, there were some other contenders of who was supposed to play this role, and a lot of people really considered him as like a comedic specific actor based on previous roles he'd been in. So I wonder without him if it would be as funny. I don't know. I guess it would, because I just find the terrorists very comedic.
Laura was watching movies like this when she was 8 years old. I think I remember watching 24 with her when she was 8. So she's definitely got some experience with
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Dad kind of held out for a while before showing his true colors of how much he loves terrorism. And he loves action. He loves like all of the Bourne movies. Those aren't as quite violent, but he just loves action films, and he loves seeing things get blown up. So I think once, I was old enough, they were a little tired and they wanted to get their fix of terrorism. I have no memories of them watching this movie. I don't know if they've seen it. I think I saw this when I was an adult. I couldn't tell you what year. I want to say it was a COVID movie. I feel like in this realm, I grew up seeing, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up watching 24 and I looked forward to watching it every week when it came out. And we watched it as a family, like a nice family gathering, watching a lot of murders happen. I feel like I grew up very comfortable and liking this genre of movie or TV show. Not always my favorite, but it's just one of those like genres and movies that it's like you can't look away. It's exciting. You want to know what's happening next. You are completely transported into their world. So I can see from Jimmy's perspective as an 8-year-old, it was probably a very exciting time. Okay, Michelle, I'm going to start with you, because even though you haven't seen this 100 times, you've definitely seen it a good amount with all the time you and Jimmy have been together. So what are your highlights?
All right, I feel like I have to start with this. I think that it's challenging to tell a story that takes place in a single day. And it's funny that we keep bringing up 24 because obviously that's like a TV show that kind of did that. But I think anytime you're able to pull that off and execute it really well, it means that there are some really great, smart, creative people behind it. And I think that if I were teaching a film class, I would include this movie in that category of like storytelling in a day. And it's a day, but it's also mostly in one setting. And I feel like they did a great job in keeping it really interesting from beginning to end.
Yeah, this almost could have been a COVID filmed movie because it really took place in one building, just on multiple floors.
From what I understand, and your listeners might correct this, but from what I understand, the building was under construction. It was just being finished, and they got the rights to go in and film in the building. So I think this was actually on location, not just a set. I could be mistaken about that. I think a lot of the construction scenes actually was what the building looked like at the time.
I'm glad that you brought up the kind of construction because I think another one of my favorite things about this movie is the set. This isn't like what I loved or what I didn't love. I thought it was kind of weird that most office buildings, when I think of an office building, there's like this kind of blinding fluorescent light that's like overly bright and kind of gives you a headache. And I get that this movie takes place at night, but that building is like extremely dark, even in the rooms that like, quote, have the lights on, with the exception of that one scene. There is a scene where I don't know if they put the lights on or if they're only using kind of like those like construction type lights in one of the rooms that are being worked on.
Yeah, it's who's Carl's brother, the one who's out for vengeance?
Yeah, it's when they first find him upstairs. He's on a floor that's still under construction.
Okay, so it's only the construction room like has regular office lighting. The rest of the building does not.
It's possible that some of it wasn't working yet or set up yet because they were still like figuring everything out.
Their floor looks like a rainforest cafe without the tables.
Yeah, great description. Great description. That's exactly what it is. I mean,
it's very 80s.
I'm still waiting to work in an office like that because most of them don't look anything like that.
I was also wondering, like, maybe it was like just like a Japanese aesthetic that they wanted it to be, more like dim and calm and zen. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking about the room where Mr. Tagagi in the scene where he's killed, and then like Holly or Ellis's office, like all those rooms are just so like dim.
And there's no cubicles, which
great.
I also think I would enjoy in an office.
Yeah, I think that everyone, if they, getting back in the offices, everyone needs a private bathroom, dim lighting, no cubicles, no fluorescent lighting. I'm wondering if the other floors were being set up as cubicles because there were some almost like half finished. It looks like there were some desks and those, 80s style boxy computers set up. It looked like fluorescent lighting was in the works. So maybe that was like the ideal floor that you want to be working on.
In Takagi's office or the boardroom or whatever room that was, the computers were in the table, which was also interesting. A lot of forward technology. Yeah.
Yeah, I also felt like the entrance of the building when Bruce Willis first arrives and he's punching in Holly's name, that seemed very futuristic to me for the 80s to, lead you to the elevator because they have that now, but you'll like press the, floor or whatever and it tells you like which elevator to go to.
I do feel like all the diehards are pretty like on the ball when it comes to technology. So it was kind of cool to see like how they integrate that into the story.
I mean, if I were in Argyle's position, I would have never left that limo ever. Even at the end, he's like, "Oh, everyone's gone. I'm still gonna hang out in here."
Because you just mentioned this, Laura, when John gets to the office building and he's like punching in Holly's name, I think that there have been times that I've watched this where I've kind of been annoyed by the whole Holly using her maiden last name, But I think watching it this time, I had kind of an appreciation of using that, which did feel true to their situation, but then not just having it be that, having it be something that like made sense for the plot and for the story, and like the reason that they were able to kind of like conceal that she was not John's wife.
Yeah, I feel like that was so important to the plot. And because I haven't seen it so much, it was kind of a detail I overlooked and didn't really care about or have a strong opinion about.
I think this is a common thing in the 80s and 90s where they would explain away things that they needed for the plot by saying, oh, this is what happens in this culture, right? So in this one, he's like, why aren't you using my name? And she says, well, it's a Japanese company, what are they going to think? And, we don't know. We have no internet. We have no idea what the customs are in Japan. The Hunt for Red October, they do a similar thing where they say, I forget exactly what the quote is, but something along the lines of, oh, this is how Russians behave. And if you haven't been to Russia and you don't know their customs, you're just going to buy in. And it's a good way of selling the plot. But I don't think that works as well today. Now that, we have the internet, we can research and be like, wait a minute. Japanese don't care if their women are married or not married and, work in the workplace.
She's a boss lady.
You're on Team Holly.
Team Holly, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the character of John McClane. I was kind of thinking about this as we watched all of the Die Hards in the last week. I don't know that they make action heroes like him anymore. So you guys can correct me on this, but I kind of liked the whole how Hans was like, calling him a cowboy, and obviously we got like the yippee-ki-yay out of that and everything.
Laura actually began to touch on this earlier, and I think that this was actually a shift at the time, and maybe it's shifted back, but your action heroes had to be your Schwarzeneggers. They had to be your Stallones, your big muscled guys. And this was a switch where it felt like anybody could be an action hero because he was just a New York City cop. And, he used his wits to outwit the terrorists. He didn't, use his brawn. And I think that this paved the way for a lot of other, Keanu Reeves in Speed. I think it paved the way for a lot of everyman action heroes over the next, 10 plus years.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, so you're kind of saying this was like the beginning of a new era, not like the end
it's kind
of an old one.
The beginning of the everyman action hero.
I feel like partially the comedic aspect of this movie was like accidental or just like a perfect match once they brought Bruce Willis in, because I almost feel like his sarcasm and comedic nature usually comes in with like the support or the helping character of the hero, because we see a lot of movies, like action movies, where they're working with someone and they're not always alone. He doesn't have that kind of like supporting friend who's guiding him through the hallways or through the elevator shaft, and he kind of takes this lead where he doesn't take himself seriously. Like he's just kind of in motion, is doing what he knows how to do with his own job and I guess wits. And I feel like that's what kind of sets this movie apart, that it's like a one-man show, but it's not, so it doesn't take itself too seriously.
It's interesting. You guys were talking about genres earlier, and I think Michelle called this an action comedy, and it certainly is an action comedy. But you could twist it and also call it a fish out of water movie, which I also happen to like, because John's not comfortable being in LA and being around business people. He's comfortable being around cops. And you could also call this a buddy cop movie, and it's an interesting take on a buddy cop movie because Reginald Val Johnson, plays his buddy, but they never actually see each other until the end. But they're talking the entire time. And I think that this definitely fits in that buddy cop genre that was very popular at the time as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Bruce is helping him, like not the other way around. So he kind of has no one on the inside helping him out.
One of my favorite things about the movie is their relationship, I think, especially Jimmy, hearing you kind of like position it as their version of doing like a buddy cop situation, but it's like in such a different way. And I don't feel like they needed to do this, or maybe they did, I guess, because it's a little bit of like a redemption, that they have this backstory for Powell that he like shot a kid, which is kind of like a really, I don't
It's really
know,
sad.
a really, yeah, like sad, serious thing in a movie that's supposed to be somewhat comedic. But I feel like that's like the heart of this movie is in their relationship. And rewatching it the last few times I've watched it, I've really like looked forward to all the scenes that they have like talking back and forth.
That's a big part of the ending is the fact that he shot this kid, and the fact that he is a desk jockey at this point because of that.
Yeah. And it also brings in a great like opening for the comedy of his boss for with Paul Gleason's character. I think it's like comedic, but like he doesn't know that he's being comedic kind of thing. I think that his presence in the movie is like one of the funniest things to me. I'll save some of my favorite lines for later.
He feels the need to call himself out as Sergeant every time he gets on the mics.
I also love that when he's talking to John McClane for the first time, and I think John says who am I talking to? And he says,
"This is Deputy Chief of Police Dwayne T. Robinson, and I am in charge of this situation."
And I noticed that like he introduces himself to a couple other people throughout the movie, and he does not use the T. So I felt like he used the T with John specifically because he felt like he really needed to position himself as like a person of importance. I love that little detail.
I'm gonna guess that you're not gonna then quote the response that Bruce Willis gives him back.
I'm not the one who just got butt fucked on national TV, Dwayne.
So many cartoonish characters in this movie. Well, Jimmy, I'm sure that you have a very long list, but if you had to boil it down to a couple of things that you love most about this movie, what is it?
I really like the intro. I like movies that don't just drop you off in the middle. And I think that late 80s, early 90s is kind of last where we would see him on the plane, right? I think I guess if you need to have Argyle there, you might see him get in a limo, but you wouldn't see him on the plane. And I like the little segue with the music when they're doing, a little bit of the starring and you get to kind of see where he's coming from. That gives me some nostalgia when anytime I turn on an 80s or a 90s movie. I love the limo scene with Bruce and Argyle. That Christmas song is awesome. And I love that they kind of frame it in a way that you don't know it's a Christmas song. So you're kind of with Bruce, like we put on some Christmas music and then, it turns into a Christmas song. And just Argyle's whole attitude. I was a little disappointed because I remember a few years back, I was looking up to see what else the guy that played Argyle had been in. And he really hasn't been in very much. And I felt like he just showed a lot of promise in this, and he was entertaining to follow. I think the banter that Bruce has with Hans and with Dwayne and pretty much anyone that he's talking to, the witty comebacks that he basically has throughout the movie are what keep it entertaining and light. At the same time, you are seeing people riddled with bullets throughout the entire movie. So I think without that, it probably becomes a little heavy, but you almost forget that people are being shot up left and right or cut by saws or however else, or hung by chains or whatever the case may be, blown up on top of a building, thrown off a building. You forget that that's all happening because of the witty lines in between.
I think that Argyle wasn't in any other movies is a bad joke, but I don't think he ever left the limo. I'm telling you, he was loving that limo.
He had the teddy bear.
He just found some mama bears.
Fucking bear.
Does anyone want to talk about Ellis?
Ellis? I would save that for things I did not like. Do you have anything notable to say about Ellis in the what did you like section?
I think that the terrorists come off as really cool in this movie, as cool as a terrorist group can. Not that you're rooting for them, but you're entertained by them. You're not like, oh man, I really want to see these guys lose. And, obviously you're rooting for McClane. So yeah, I think you need Ellis as the guy that you dislike and are rooting against because he's Weasley. And I also think that's important because of all of the hostages outside of Takagi, he's the only one that doesn't make it to the end of the movie. And I think that would hit a lot harder if you had an affinity for him.
I do always love in movies when there's like the really bad guy, but then there's also like a secondary bad guy who's like a little bit more low stakes, just kind of adds an extra layer in the story. And also he has one of the best lines in the movie. Sorry if I'm stealing someone's line for favorite line section, but when he says the Hans Booby.
Which actually was my name coming in originally, and then we got kicked out, and when we came back in, I forgot to change it back.
This is just for our entertainment. These
Oh.
names do not get translated into anywhere else, so which is a shame because Laura's always extremely creative with hers.
And also the name of our groups are always great.
Yes. Oh, by the way, for those watching on video, Jimmy, could you stand up and reveal what's on your t-shirt?
Yeah, I have this one because Michelle wouldn't get me the one that says ho, 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 now I have a machine gun. She thought that people might not like that when you're walking around.
Yeah, I don't feel like having a shirt that says I have a machine gun is a shirt that anyone should own. For those who are not watching on video, Jimmy is wearing a t-shirt that says Nakatomi Plaza Christmas Party 1988 in a very nice design. And unlike last episode in which I was wearing a sweater and a winter hat and gloves and a scarf and have my AC on, today I have my heat on and I'm wearing the closest thing I could find in my closet to a John McClane outfit and just wearing a white ribbed tank top.
It's funny because I didn't do this on purpose, but I was trying to take advantage of Cyber Monday yesterday, which I didn't because I fell asleep while watching the end of this movie along with my shopping cart. But I had a ribbed tank top in there a white ribbed tank top from Abercrombie in there because I need to get rid of my old ones. So that's why I'm staying festive.
You're one of the employees at the Christmas party.
Exactly. All I need is the haircut and I'm set.
Laura, how about you? What are some of your favorite things?
I have to say the terrorists are my favorite. Lots of running. Oh, like so much hair in the way. I was so drawn in by their hair. And there is a 20-minute period where the gang of terrorists are just running. They look like a pack of horses in this building, but I just find them so comedic because I haven't seen this a lot. And you said, oh, this is so exciting. We get Alan Rickman on for another holiday episode. I love that this is his debut movie because his entrance to this movie is incredible. And I feel like it's our entrance to Alan into the movie universe. And he just comes out like so poised. He knows exactly what's about to go down. He kind of narrates this entire movie with like, oh yeah, I knew that the cops were probably going to show up at some point. We've planned this out. And I like that he's a very like cool terrorist. Like he's very confident in himself. He's not too mean where it's like overdone and cartoonish. I feel like he has like this very sense of humanness in him, and he's kind of just there to get the job done.
A lot of parallels to Christoph Waltz's first role in like how big and how much he just kind of took up the screen. And I wouldn't say he stole the movie from Bruce Willis, but he was definitely Bruce Willis's equal in the movie.
I think that they were so great together, and I couldn't agree more with you, Michelle, what you mentioned earlier with just or Jimmy, sorry, this was you, but the banter between Bruce and the terrorists. I feel like there is a lot of nostalgia with the idea of like walkie-talkies and having a radio, and thinking in COVID terms, you could argue that would have been a perfect writing inclusion to have to shoot this without having contact between actors, but I felt like it worked really well for this movie. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but again, I loved 24 growing up, and I think this genre and the sense of urgency that you're always on a clock and you're just waiting for the next explosion or machine gun to come off just adds a lot of excitement while you're watching this, and you're always kind of waiting for the next scene, as much as army crawling through pipes and being stuck in elevator shafts definitely gave me a lot of anxiety. I felt like those scenes were always exciting but equally funny. I feel like I connected with Bruce Willis on the level that he was always like having conversations with himself in addition to people on the walkie-talkies. I loved a lot of the supporting characters, including Argyle. I think that added a nice comedic touch to having someone who is physically involved in where this is all happening, but having zero clue that it's going on. And I felt like they had a lot of, introductions to everyone who kind of wants like a piece of the pie and wants to be the big hero in this movie, which again, I think differentiates from some other movies in this category. Having different villains who aren't the overt villains, I think is really fun. One other one that I thought of was like the news anchor. And I think that's a common inclusion in movies, but also something that's so apparent in the world that we live in today, where like everything is turned into like a news story or amusement for people. Because if people were kind of, watching this along, or you hear of something really tragic happening, people's first instinct is to like Google it and not to like always find out ways to help. I think some people's curiosity is just piqued and they want to know what's going on. They want to be able to live stream it. They want to be able to look at the Twitter updates. It just has a lot of the good notes of what works for an original screenplay, a good action movie, really great characters, but in its own way. Like, I think that this movie does just a really good job of, like, to Jimmy's point, having its own genre, and that's what makes me appreciate it with all of these things combined. I was like pleasantly surprised at parts, even though I wish I would have watched this earlier. I don't know how I could possibly fall asleep during this movie. There's so many guns going off, but I've inherited our mother's falling asleep genes on the couch at any time, dimness level, ambient, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. It could be a garbage truck driving outside my window and I'll fall asleep if I'm on my couch. Well, I don't know if Jimmy is going to have too many things that he doesn't like, but if you guys are open, I'd like to start.
Please do.
I have a very big one that Michelle will appreciate, and I'm going to give a little plug back to our Indiana Jones episode because it falls in this category. The plot, I understand. If you look at the synopsis, it's about an estranged husband, getting into crazy circumstances of being in a fight with terrorists and trying to save hostages in Los Angeles over Christmas. Makes sense. What are they stealing? And what does the company do? And why do they have so many bombs? Can anyone explain this to me? Because I must have been half asleep at this point where they finally break into the vault. But the whole time I was thinking, I was like, oh, maybe the papers that Holly put in there has some, cryptic code on there. But it looked like this weird structure in there. It looked like a wheelchair. Like I thought that like a Yoda person was going to pop out, or maybe I was just like, I need to rewatch that scene. But can either of you explain?
All right, before Jimmy explains it, can I just tell you, in case he's not going to say this, how excited Jimmy is going to be to get to explain this to you, because I can't tell you how many discussions we had over the summer after Jimmy listened to our Indiana Jones episode where, like, he still will randomly bring up, he's like, I don't understand how you guys didn't understand what was happening. So,
I'm going to explain that too.
The relics. Was there a relic in
It was
the
other
vault?
relics. It was all the things that the government had hidden from you. Sorry, this is going back to the Indiana Jones episode. The Ark of the Covenant, the general public, they're not equipped to handle that. And supposedly there's millions of these other relics that are out there that the general public's just not able to comprehend or would cause chaos if they knew about. This question is great, and I don't know, you guys probably don't shout out other podcasts, but
we do.
I know that this is a huge fascination of Bill Simmons, the Rewatchables. They talk about this nonstop if you want to learn about bearer bonds. But bearer bonds were this big thing, plot device in the 80s and 90s, where it's basically untraceable money. It's the same as a bond security, except the holder is the owner of it, as opposed to a different type of bond where you might have to sign it over to a person, like a deed. So whoever has the bearer bonds has the money, and it can't be traced as to where it came from. So if you think of it as $640 million in cash, instead of bearer bonds, it would probably make more sense. But it also would be a lot harder to carry it out of the vault. So they probably use bearer bonds because they could just have like a stack of loose leaf and be like, oh yeah, here are the bearer bonds. We printed $640 million worth of bearer bonds. It's 500 sheets of loose leaf.
Jimmy said the word bonds, and I immediately blacked out. Our father has tried to sit me down many a time to explain bonds to me, and I'm like, I have something I have to do. I have to go to just leave this situation. There's a reason I have not tried to educate myself on cryptocurrency either. I will stick to cash and credit cards. Thank you very much.
All right, but I get the untraceable nature and some kind of untraceable money.
It's essentially cash. It's cash. But if they did $640 million in cash, they had 6 guys. I don't know how they were going to, or 9 guys to start, how they were going to carry it all out. So this
when
kind
they
of gave
break
them an
in,
easier way.
it's papers?
Yep. It's literally 8x11 loose leaf printed on, but it's supposedly bearer bonds.
I'm surprised that they had so many explosives. This is very risky.
It's true.
Okay, that's helpful. I still am not following why they just seemed like maybe it was like just a contingency plan, but it felt like they had a lot of steps involved when they got there. They were like ripping out cords, and I think that was just to disconnect them from the rest. But was it just me? It just felt like there was a lot.
Yeah, not that $640 million isn't a lot of money, and it probably was even more at the time. But you're right. Like, they had 8 missile launchers. They had enough C4 to blow up the top of the building. Like, these are very well-financed terrorists. I don't know that $640 million was worth the investment they might have put in to get in there.
I didn't even think about that. Like, the amount of money it probably cost them just to, like, run their operation.
I mean, he had this suit from the shop in London that Yasser Arafat shops at. Yes. That was a couple $1 million probably, it sounded like.
Yeah, okay, Jimmy, that's your homework. You have to cost out how much all of their weapons added up to. In 1988. The missile specifically is mind-boggling to me. They knew that an army truck was coming?
Yeah, exactly. What did they have? What were they expecting?
My other big qualm is I don't like that bear. And I don't know why that was the gift that he was bringing. I mean, I presume he was bringing to his kids, but he was acting like he wasn't going to see them because he was going to stay at someone's house. So maybe he was bringing the bear just as company. I have a lot of questions, but I was not like a little. There's sizes that are acceptable for bears, and that size, I'm out.
This is actually a great question that I wanted to bring up to you, Laura, because we're not, West Coasters and all. How far is Pomona, and where exactly is that? Do you know where that is?
I want to say it's in the valley, let's say.
Okay, because he says he's going to go sleep at his former captain's house in Pomona. In my few visits to California, I've never heard of Pomona.
We do have a Pomona, New York, right near where we grew up.
We do.
Well, if he's going there, then he's going to be spending a couple of days in the car,
that's
not just
very east. It's like all the way. It's just East LA.
So it makes sense that he would be driving from Nakatomi to there, that it would take him half the night?
It depends on what time the Christmas party got out.
Okay.
If the Christmas party lasted till 11, he'd get there in probably 20 minutes. That's a long ride during rush hour. I don't really have many nitpicks about this movie. I think that there's a lot of things that are written to like 80s scripts, and I really dislike the 80s. I know I didn't even grow up then, but I don't like the hairstyles and the general lighting and the cocaine. I mean, cocaine still exists in Los Angeles, but I think it was like a big thing back in the day. It kind of makes it more like comedic and almost cartoonish of the characters to have certain things included, like the people hooking up in the, empty office, Ellis doing cocaine and like talking about how he closes $1 million deals on the fly. It's so like cheesy and out there instead of something that I would consider to be annoyed about. I think I find it difficult with action movies to really critique and like find things to latch onto, because I think my reasoning for watching the movies is not to really like nitpick every piece of how it's structured and the characters. Like it's more about me being there to just enjoy like the, next exciting scenes and the things that keep me on my toes. So I think that allows me to ease up a little bit on making many judgments. I can see in Michelle's face that she has some things that she would like to share.
I do. Well, first, I kind of wanted to back you up in saying that you ended up falling asleep. Not that I think that this movie is boring, but for all the times I've seen it at this point, I have a really hard time breaking the movie down like scene by scene in my head, which makes me think that there are too many scenes that feel like they're the same. And I get that this is like an action movie, and I think anytime there are action scenes in any movie, even like, superhero movies, my eyes kind of just glaze over, and in the back of my head I'm just thinking like, this is unimportant, like let's just get to the next plot point. I'm wondering if this movie was made today, if it could be trimmed down like just a little bit, maybe like cut a couple scenes. I feel like there aren't in my mind like enough markers of like significant things that happen in between the action scenes.
He's one man, right? And I think there's 11 terrorists at the beginning. There could be more. He can't face all 11 at once. So just by the fact that he's one person, I feel like it has to draw out the movie a little bit. I mean, maybe he can take two at a time every once in a while, but if you think about it like that, you get to the end and there's still 7 or 6 terrorists left. The ending doesn't really work, because how's he going to kill 6 or 7 people before he rescues his wife, or before they shoot his wife or shoot him? I mean, I guess they could have maybe came in with 6 or 7 terrorists instead.
Yeah, but I think it's also like when you think about the characters in Ocean's 11, who are essentially like terrorists in a different way, even though, we're rooting for them in that movie. Those characters are really characters. I mean, they spend an enormous amount of time at the beginning of the movie making sure that we know all of these people like as individuals. Whereas in Die Hard, obviously, like we know Carl, like a couple of them are like recognizable.
How many of the terrorists can you actually name?
Well, this is the point I'm trying to make. I can't. They're all just like, as Laura describes in the beginning, like galloping men with like long hair and accents that are, European, but supposedly not German. And maybe each of the action or fight scenes are a little bit different because John's, getting more and more beat up along the way. And maybe he has to use like different pieces of like equipment and like be scrappy to fight them along the way. But they're still too similar for me to like find enjoyment in like seeing that over and over again.
I definitely start to literally doze off at the end, but I also think that we feel it a little bit more because of the setting. If you think about it, he's really on a lot of those like unfinished floors for a chunk of the movie. I also think that the police squad is there a little bit too long. I almost wish that they would have came in like, I don't know, either earlier, or maybe they even had like some extended ending. I know that they try and get one last shot in at the end, but I don't know. Maybe it just like ends with him and, his buddy cop like out at a diner somewhere in Pomona. He drove him home.
You're always trying to get a diner in there, Laura. Jimmy, did you want to answer your question about identifying the terrorists?
Oh, I don't think I could name that man. I mean, you got Hans, obviously. You've got Carl. You've got Carl's brother. John names a couple. I want to say one might be Fritz. You've got the guy who tells him that next time you have the shot, you should take it. You have the guy that was carrying the C4. And then you've got like 3 guys that I never noticed were in the movie before, I think, when I was paying more attention to it yesterday, that I'm not even sure when they die, but I guess it's when the C4 goes off and Powell says you got 2 with that blast. I guess that's supposedly the 2 people or 3 people that we never really saw in the movie, except for when they first came out of the elevator. I mean, you have the Asian guy that comes out of the elevator in the first scene. I don't think we ever see him again. I don't know where he went.
False.
Um, you
We
do
see
see him
him
again.
again. We do
Okay.
see him again towards the end of the movie. He was one of the guards who is like on watch. Not at the end. It feels like it's going to be the end, but when the cops are trying to make their first break-in entrance and they're
Okay.
like, "No, don't do it, don't do it." He's one of the two guards. And this is a big miss from you, Jimmy, because he is the one who breaks into the concession stand in the
Oh
office and has a
yes,
crunch
yes.
bar.
He has crunch. Actually, he
He's a
doesn't
very
just have a
important.
crunch bar. He goes back for seconds.
Yeah.
I don't know what the other candy bar he has is, but I did notice. I didn't notice that before. This was the first time I noticed that as well.
Yeah,
He has a crunch bar, and then he goes back for a second candy bar.
I need to save that. I have some commentary when we get to our food section, which is coming
Perhaps
right
we're
up.
taking too long to get there.
I have one
Okay.
more big thing, and it relates to the conversation that we were just having. And unless I missed it, we did not mention him. But in other episodes, we've talked about the fact that anytime that there's a character that we particularly really are bothered by, it's probably a reflection of us and something that we're like annoyed at that we personally do. And that's why we like hate this character. An example of this is if you listen to the Jingle All the Way episode, I really hated the ball girl because she reminded me of me like as a little kid. So my equivalent for that in this movie is Theo, who is member of the terrorist squad, who is like the computer guy. He's doing all the tech to get all of the vault doors open. And from his very first line, he is like so irritating to me that he says like he shoots, he scores or something like that. Like when the other guy
I
like
think it's
shoots.
like Magic passes the ball to Bird. Yeah,
Yeah.
something along those lines.
He's a lot
which
of
dates the
annoying
movie.
lines.
Yeah, all of his lines
So-
are annoying.
Yeah.
He's such a know-it-all. He's so smug. And I just kept thinking, like, if I were a terrorist or I was working with in some kind of like criminal ring, I would definitely be the obnoxious person, like running the computers. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to pose this question to you guys: if you were in a criminal situation, what would your role be?
I think I'd be lookout.
You'd be the lookout.
Yeah, somewhere far away where you can easily run
Like-
when it goes to shit.
I don't think that they would give me a gun either. They would be like, "Here's a taser," because I wouldn't know how to use one. If I had to choose who I'd want to be the guy who's at the concession stand. Even though they give him a gun, I would just take my crunch bar and go home. Yeah, I don't know, Michelle. I think that you're able to open some vaults.
You're definitely
You-
our tech person in our house. I don't know that that's saying much for our house, but
You guys are also a fellow house that can't change your own light bulbs, right?
Yes.
no, we do change our own light bulbs.
We just changed light bulbs for the first time in 7 years, and it was a production.
Oh, good. Do you want to come to ours? We haven't changed ours in 6, so we're right
I
there
changed a
with you.
water filter this month.
And he's told everyone that we've seen.
Dom put together a dresser once,
Oh, once?
and we had to get rid of it because all the drawers wouldn't close. We didn't even try and fix it. We just got rid of it. Actually, it's in our. We just got another one.
I'm not making this up. Lisa's made some of the furniture in our house.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we
It's
lived in
okay.
Connecticut, Jimmy and Lisa assembled like all our living room furniture that we still have.
That's why Michelle and I have the podcast. When you're entertaining, you don't need to know how to fix things. You have people do it for you.
We need like a henchman. We need like a Carl or
Yeah.
Carl's brother.
The thing that I dislike the most about the movie ties into, well, one of the things that I dislike the most about the movie ties into what Michelle just said. I wanted more Theo. Theo is the computer guy. I wanted to understand how he was breaking those locks and what he was doing because they kept showing his screen. He's like, 6 is down, 5 is down, 4 is down, 3 is down. It didn't even look like he was doing anything. And then they get to the last one and he's like, all right, I can't do anything. So, where's your miracle? And he gives them the FBI. But I'd like to have a little bit more, even if it's like a 1980s Atari game on the screen where he's trying to get the pieces in and fit. Like, I just see a little bit more of what Theo is actually doing. Maybe have a second computer guy so that they can be conversing back and forth. It feels like he disappears for a little bit throughout the movie.
That's so true because there's a couple of silly movies that I can think of that a lot of people probably haven't seen. But I love the movie The Italian Job. Great heist film.
Same.
And one of the most exciting aspects of that movie is watching Charlize Theron like opening safes, and they make it very like you're holding your breath. You know, there's a scene where they get to and she thinks that she hits a layer of glass inside of the safe and she's like nervous that she broke it and then she won't be able to open it. And you're right, Jimmy. They could have added like a couple more steps in there. Another movie, The Pacifier with Vin Diesel.
Don't think I've seen that one.
No, I haven't seen that either.
It's a very like cheaper by the dozen adjacent movie. So it came out more so in my childhood. But spoiler alert, he ends up in a secret room and there's a couple of steps that he has to take, like go over some like lava floors and things like that to get to the end. And it's very exciting. And you're right. We deserve, if you're going to give us an annoying computer guy, at least give us the fun computer aspects. Like, what if there were levels to getting into the vaults? Like, he had to go through fire, you know. Maybe they weren't as well equipped in the building remodel, but maybe that was coming. I could see there being, like, sharks or some other things.
Yeah, if it was a little bit more James Bond villainous to get into that vault, I think that would be more interesting than just, I cracked this one, I cracked that one.
It could be fun with Bruce Willis, like, getting to the point where Holly, like, they somehow meet up. She, like, escapes from the hostage situation. She's like, you have to save those bonds because our money's in it. And he cares less about saving the hostages, and his goal is to save the bonds. And there's a tussle between him and Theo.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. We don't really care if the terrorists get away with the bonds. We just want the hostages to be safe. So another thing that I disliked about the movie, or maybe I didn't understand, when Carl's brother is fiddling with the pipes and the wires, and he's connecting the wires together, but he's cutting and splicing, and then Carl comes over and he just slices through everything, and all of the phones go out. What is Carl's brother doing? Well, how is the splicing changing anything when all of the wires get cut immediately by Carl anyway? Why is Carl's brother there? What is he attempting to do? And how does this have any impact on the rest of the movie? And I have asked this question myself every single time I've watched the movie.
I feel like I'm taking an annoying math test. It's like, Jan has 6 apples. Joseph has 7. Take 3 away, then add a pickle. Who has more apples?
Well, they're playing music that's intended to make you think that it's a pressure situation and getting you anxious. And then he just comes and slices through all the wires, so I'm not really sure what that's about.
Okay, I've written a backstory explanation for this. It's one of my favorite things to do on this show. And that is that Carl's brother is not really useful for anything. He's just kind of a tag along. Carl was like, hey, my brother really wants to be a terrorist. And Hans like, all right, fine, he can come. And all they really gave him, like the job that they gave him to do wasn't actually like work. He just thought that he was doing something.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like, cut some wires.
Yeah, they're like, just see if you can cut through these wires a little bit and then tie some knots.
But
that would have been a funnier reaction if Hans was like, see, I told you that Carl would get shot, instead of like, oh, we have to tell him that his brother died.
Yes, which is one of my favorite quotes. We have to do something. Yes, we have to tell him that his brother died. If that's the case, why did they send Carl's brother to be the first to try to apprehend Bruce Willis? Shouldn't they have sent someone more capable?
Send in your weakest guy because they know that it's going to escalate for the movie.
And then the last thing that I really disliked, I think that Laura kind of touched on a little bit, but while I have nostalgia for 80s movies, I have zero nostalgia for 80s hair. Male, female. I mean, what is up with Holly's hair? It is insane. Alan Rickman's hair, awful. Carl's hair, everybody's hair in this movie looks absolutely terrible.
All right, so I know we've been teasing a couple out, but Jimmy, we're going to start with you. This is our favorite line and favorite scene section. They don't have to go together, they can be separate.
Do we do least favorite scene too? Is that later?
Sure.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because you kind of touched on something about falling asleep, and then you said the movie could have ended sooner. I kind of lose a little bit of interest at the end of this movie. I feel like the last 10 to 15 minutes, outside of the scene where he's, laughing with Hans, and you have the reach for the wife's watch, and, Hans falling out of the building, that scene's interesting to me. But like the upstairs on the roof and the FBI guys blowing up, it's great because it has the payoff of, I guess we need 2 more FBI guys by Paul Gleason. But outside of that, I feel like that whole scene is just time spent that I'm less interested in. But as far as favorite quotes, it's really hard to differentiate from any of the banter lines like, no effing shit lady, does it sound like I'm ordering a pizza? Or Glass, who gives a shit about Glass? I'm not the one who got butt effed on TV, national television, Dwayne. Like all of the comebacks that McClane has when people are telling him no or telling him he shouldn't be doing what he's doing when he's trying to protect these 30 hostages by himself. As far as favorite scenes, I think they both involve Argyle. I really love the beginning limo scene, as I mentioned. All that back and forth between him and John McClane and getting an idea for who John is as a person and what his relationship status is and why he's there. It's a lot of exposition, but it's done in a funny way. And then I know Michelle's eyes lit up during this scene, but when Argyle gets out of the limo and punches Theo to knock him out in the ambulance, and then he kind of turns to the camera and breaks the fourth wall, I think that's a great moment. And it's worthy of him breaking the fourth wall.
Love.
Great answers.
I'll also just say that this movie is really great with callbacks. You have Alice saying, hey, show him the watch, show him the watch. That becomes a big thing at the end. And I think, there's countless situations where that's true. Of course, I'm on a podcast now and I'm blanking on what the rest of them are.
I have
but
one
I think,
for you.
There's a lot of them. There you go. What? Hit me.
Well, you talk about how much you love the opening scene and the kind of setup, but the conversation that he has with his seatmate on the plane about taking your shoes off.
Yep, that was another
there's
one.
the first one thing that he says is like, I can't wait to wash up, which I can relate to. I'm sure everyone can. He cannot wait to shower after you get off a plane. But the fact that they were able to use that, like his outfit is so important to this movie. It just makes the stakes higher that he's stepping on broken glass and like doesn't have clothes on. A very 80s like heartthrob move.
Also leads to one of my biggest nitpicks about the movie, but I hope we have a nitpick section because I think there's a lot of them. I mentioned the wires, but so
didn't we just do our nitpick section?
Well, we did things we didn't like. We don't have an official nitpick section, but Jimmy, just for you.
I'm loving that we have a second nitpick section coming from the guy whose favorite movie it is.
He kills Carl's brother and he says, "Oh crap, size 9. Why do these terrorists have such small feet?" He then kills like 5 or 6 other people before he has to walk on the glass. All of them have small feet. He couldn't find one person with a large enough shoe to put on his feet. I don't know. I found that weird. He compliments Hans on his American accent. I'm sorry, Alan Rickman, but your American accent in this movie is not good. So I don't know why he's complimenting him on having a terrific accent that fooled him. I think like maybe the first 3 words sound somewhat American, and then after that he goes right back to being Hans Gruber. And he's like, "Oh, you could have fooled me with that accent." Yeah. Would have been more interesting if we hadn't seen Hans at that point. We didn't know that he was the terrorist leader.
Yeah.
It's true.
That would have been a really obviously like a waste of such an amazing actor, but for a really good story to like hear his voice but never see him until then. And then, I mean, he would have fooled me, just like, even though I know you said that his accent was bad, but maybe that could have been like kind of a little wink to the audience, like the first tell that he was not who he said he was.
Yes.
I also want to see, Laura, your version of like Die Hard during COVID. Because I think that you're right. It's like this movie was like made to be shot. Not that I want COVID to happen again, but like It has all the parameters of like people, actors not being in scenes together, being in like, this abandoned building. It's got all the ingredients.
Yeah. Michelle, what about you?
All right, I have two favorite scenes. One, I don't know, Jimmy, that you cited this one specifically, but the Argyle scene that starts with John saying, Argyle, tell me you heard those shots and you're calling the police. And then it cuts to Argyle, and that's when he's really like jamming out and having a good time. And I mean, we see that in so many like TV and movies. And I just love that, like the seriousness of then seeing. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I point out a TV, well, it's your favorite TV show, but that when you said that, that made me think of the episode of Seinfeld when they're on the plane sitting in first class and like the differentiation between being stuck in the back and they cut to them at the front eating ice cream and they're like, mmm.
And I think Argyle is drinking champagne in the back of the limo, right? I think he's
has, like,
pouring himself
liquor.
champagne and he's talking to his girlfriend, telling him how his boss thinks he's on the way to Vegas. And
the bear's in the back seat.
He ends up driving at the end of the movie after drinking that bottle of champagne. Maybe he should have, let John drive.
I feel like it was funny. The as much as I dislike the bear, having the bear in that scene made it funnier.
This is like completely out of order, but I kind of wanted to bring this up in my What Did We Hate section and forgot. But Laura, you just reminded me of it because of Seinfeld. But I think one of the other things that I don't like about this movie is the whole argument about like, is this a Christmas movie or is this not a Christmas movie? Like the first year that this was kind of brought up on the internet, like it was like a fun discussion. And now I feel like it's kind of like a dated joke almost. And the reason that you made me think of it when you brought up Seinfeld was because there is this episode where Elaine is dating this guy who keeps like saying these like kind of outlandish like fun facts that are like incorrect, but he's like doing it on purpose to like kind of make a connection with someone or like to get a reaction out of somebody. Jimmy, can you think of like an actual I couldn't think of like an exact example from that episode.
Dustin Hoffman is in Star Wars.
Yeah, so like something like that. And
he does it to win a date. He says, I bet you that Dustin Hoffman is in Star Wars. And basically he wins either way because when he's wrong, he has to take Elaine out on a date.
Okay, so now I feel like in the year 2023, when someone's like, if the movie Die Hard comes up, apologies to anyone listening to this who does this, that I'm judging you, but I feel like anyone who says, yeah, but, is Die Hard a Christmas movie or is it not a Christmas movie? I'm just kind of like, I'm so over the discussion and I think it's dumb. Like at this point with all the Christmas movies out there or just movies out there in general, if you enjoy watching it at Christmas, it's a Christmas movie. And if you don't, then it's not. End of discussion.
Die Hard is most certainly an all-year movie.
I mean, we've watched this not at Christmas. And that's fine. And when we watch it, we just watched it, around Christmas time, and it felt like a Christmas movie. So it doesn't matter. I'm over the conversation.
If your tree is up, it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't engage in the argument, but I do agree with Jimmy. It's like it could be a Christmas movie. It also doesn't have to be a Christmas movie.
All right. Returning back to favorite scenes. Talked about the Argyle scene already. My other favorite scene, I think, is when Powell, Reginald Val Johnson, finally answers the call, shows up at the circle in front of Nakatomi, and sadly, when the body falls on his car, because I think not only is it a really it feels like a pivotal scene, as a viewer, it kind of felt like the first sense of relief because you're so by that point, I'm so annoyed that John cannot get anyone to take him seriously. He's calling the dispatch. That woman is so annoying that she's not taking him seriously. And he's had so many like failed attempts at this point, and it felt like the first time we're like, all right, he got a win. And in thinking about what I said earlier about like so many of these scenes feel like they're the same, that one stands out to me as like, okay, this is like a notable turning point in the movie.
Yeah, your best scene is better than mine. The scene's funny. It's fast. They're turning my car into Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Who's driving that car? Stevie Wonder. Like, you get the banter back and forth at the same time that you're being entertained by the action, and it's all happening really fast, and you're kind of like, oh no, if he doesn't get away, then John's gonna be by himself again. I want that. That's my scene. I'm picking that scene.
We can share
I
it.
wouldn't have expected the dead body to be Michelle's favorite scene.
Favorite lines, I wrote a lot down, but I don't know. I feel like Jimmy kind of said so many of like the classic ones. I do really like the line where he says,
"Come out to the coast. We'll get together. Have a few laughs."
Look forward to saying that next time I visit Laura and Dom in California, so that I can bring that up and now you'll know what I'm talking about.
We're going to start using that a lot.
Yes.
I'm close to certain that was ad-libbed, actually.
Really?
Because he was in there and he didn't know what to do, and he just, I think.
I can use
love
that on you guys too. You guys
can.
are on the coast.
We live on a
Just
different
another
coast.
Okay, for me, favorite scene, you took mine, Michelle, but I just love the contrast of him saying, "Please tell me you heard the gunshots," and just him jam down the car. You know what? I rescind my response to Jimmy's question earlier, or I don't know if it was you, which terrorist you would be. My answer would be none, and I would just be Argyle. I would be Argyle in the car, having a good time. Although I feel like being stuck in a parking garage, like it was unknowingly, he didn't know what was going on. But if I knew that, no. So I think, ignorance is bliss for our boy Argyle.
At what point, though, in the movie do you just drive off or try to drive off because you're like, this guy's never coming back? He hasn't called you in like 2 hours?
It seemed like he was having a better time waiting. He was like excited to be waiting and just to have this time to hang out in the
He was having
limo.
a great time. Okay, favorite lines, since we're going on the theme of nitpicks and really, going into things that we didn't like. I hate the quote, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." I think it's so stupid. And I think it kind of falls in the category, Michelle. Like, maybe I would feel differently if it wasn't said so much, but I'm going to throw in this. We need a name for this category. That's on my to-do list for next episode. I'm throwing this in the category with, here's to looking at you, kid. We're
going to need a bigger boat.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Let's get rid of all of them.
I agree with you in this movie especially. Yeah. I never understood, and I said I like this scene, and I do kind of like this scene, but I never really understood. Like, it didn't feel right. It felt awkward that they're laughing at the end after saying it. It's like, it's not a funny line. Like, why are we laughing about it?
Yeah. And Michelle uses this argument a lot, but when people use a lot of cursing, sometimes it feels like a cheat. And I think that there are a lot of instances in this movie where they throw the F-bomb around a lot, which maybe heightens some emotions, but I don't think it like adds much. So I always grab after like the not as well known but witty lines. There's two that I can think of that Han says. One is he won't be joining us for the rest of his life. I think it's really funny. And I like that when he's on the phone, another big question mark. I have no idea what he's talking about, but he's like name dropping all these countries. And I think he's basically trying to say like people who are involved. And, what's Carl's brother's name? It's one of the
We keep saying Carl's brother. None of us know his actual name.
Mouths to him like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, I read it in
Time magazine.
Time magazine. I thought that was funny. And I do like the quote about going to the coast.
See, Maybe. It's not fair because I came in this blind, so I didn't know to write down quotes. But the Time magazine is one that I love to requote as well.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm curious. I think if we had grown up watching this movie, we would have a lot of good subtle quotes. But there's a lot of quotes. I think almost everything that Theo says, I just dislike because I just don't think they're funny.
No.
Hey, I wish that they also would have had a couple ladies in
Oh, a
the
girl
terrorist
terrorist?
mix, because I was thinking a lot about the contrast, even though this is a 90s movie, but Home Alone 3 plugging another episode, but I think that Alice really adds a lot to the terrorist mix. She's a lot of comedic scenes. I think that maybe they could have had a female version of Theo who was funny.
What about like Brigitte Wilson as Carl's sister instead of Carl's brother? Or you
Oh,
could have them both.
Yeah.
I like that. And also, they have a girl terrorist in Die Hard 3, if that gives you any incentive to watch it.
Nice.
She's not utilized like nearly to the fullest, but
She's
she's there.
not of many words.
No, I think she has no lines, actually.
She's in scenes almost by herself, and she still doesn't talk.
Yeah.
All right. Someone write another lady heist movie.
And also, we can now call Carl's brother Andres because I looked it up.
Andrish?
Yeah.
Andres.
I think
Doesn't
it's
roll off the
spelled
tongue.
Andreas, but I think in the movie they say Andres.
Andres. Okay. Fair.
R.I.P.
I am very excited to move into our food section for this week because there's surprisingly not, actually, or unsurprisingly, not too many food moments, but I had a lot of fun putting my thoughts together for this one. So, Jimmy, the first question that we kind of kick off here is what, if anything, as you take a bite of your pasta, does this movie make you want to eat?
Twinkies. I mean, it's the first thing that comes to mind for me, at least. I don't think I've had a Twinkie in maybe ever, but definitely not in the last 25 years.
I think they're illegal now. I'm not kidding. They like banned. I think they got rid of them, and someone brought them back and had to like lower the.
How many Twinkies
cancer-causing
does he
chemicals.
buy? I think he buys like 7. There's a bunch in the back seat.
I don't know. Well, doesn't
That-
Bruce? I think I might have woken up. Doesn't Bruce Willis eat a Twinkie at some scene?
Yes,
I-
and he says, "What are in these things?"
So
And
they don't
then-
have shoes accessible in the in the construction zones, but they have Twinkies available.
Yeah.
Maybe a
apparently.
construction worker left one behind.
Maybe.
That's
I think
plausible.
other that and the candy bars, I can't really. I think the guy who's watching the Notre Dame game at the beginning, the security guard that they kill when they come in the building, I feel like he might be eating a sandwich or he's eating something. There's
No.
not. I mean, for a party, there's not a lot of food in this movie.
No,
Yeah.
there's not.
Are there even drinks in the movie?
There
I don't
are.
see. There are people carrying drinks and like beers and stuff.
Bruce Willis drinks like a punch, even though he
Okay.
offers him champagne and he like takes a sip and isn't into it. He probably makes one of his 6 snide comments. Oh, Los Angeles. So stupid.
Probably not the best decision if you want to, live throughout the ordeal. But I think if terrorists are taking over my Christmas party, I'm gonna get my drink on. And I didn't see anybody doing that.
Yeah. Hans also has he eats a couple bites. He gets hungry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
don't know
another
what
kind
he
of
eats.
like comedic scene is like when he's talking to like all the hostages, he's just sitting in a chair like eating a plate of food that's like presumably from their party. I thought that was funny, even though I couldn't make out what was on the plate.
It reminded me of Rusty in Ocean's 11,
Yes.
even though he doesn't eat half as much as him.
But I didn't have any food moments other
So-
than the one line that I think what Mr. Takagi might say this. He says, "Can I get you anything? Food, cake, watered down champagne?"
Nice. I would think that they would have fancy champagne at that party. They got all those bonds. They don't have fancy champagne.
They have fancy champagne in the third one. I think it's this movie. He said Bruce Willis gets mad at one point, and this is the weirdest line in the entire movie too. And I don't have this written down, so I don't know it word for word. But he says something along the lines of, "I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna eat you. I'm going to fry you up and I'm going to eat you." And I always found that line is out of place and weird for Bruce to say, but that is the line in the movie. So at some point, McClane considers possibly cannibalism of Hans Gruber.
I mean, I don't blame him. So before I kind of launch into my thoughts, my heart goes out to Argyle in this movie because even though he's boozing and having a good time, is he not starving down? Like he must be so hungry. And then Bruce is probably above him on the list, but he might have said that line out of desperation and hunger. He was on that 5-hour flight. God knows they did not have good food on that plane in the 80s. We think we're getting bad food now. Maybe he could have had like a bacon, egg, and cheese before he hopped on the flight. That's the only thing I'm thinking would have held him over. But he is a cop. He's a, meaty man. He needs to eat. He goes to that party. He has a sip of punch. I don't see him eat anything. So I think that he was starting to like see some stars. He's bloody. He's got glass in his feet. He has a bite of a Twinkie. I mean, he needs energy. It's a lot of terrorists to kill. So I am very hungry while watching this movie, not because of the food that's shown, but for the lack of food that's shown. When he says, like, what do you think, I'm calling for a pizza? I'm like, yeah, you might be calling for a pizza because he seems hungry. This movie makes me really want shrimp cocktail, even though there's no shrimp cocktail in it. But like as the holidays are approaching, I was actually going to suggest this in our family group chat. How can we bring shrimp cocktail into the mix for Christmas Eve? We got to make it happen. And I keep finding really good recipes for shrimp cocktail, like with good seasoning and good, dips and garnishes. So
okay, great. I was gonna say if you're not making your own cocktail sauce, like I don't want your shrimp cocktail.
Oh no,
you got like the grocery stuff.
I not to boast, but last New Year's Eve I made a fantastic shrimp cocktail from our girl Molly Baz's recipe cabinet. And I made a horseradish sauce, and it was a big hit. So nice. I would have liked to see that featured at the holiday party, along with some good bites, maybe some crostinis or things like that. But it made me just want to have like my own holiday bites. And the champagne, I think it was in like plastic cups. They didn't even get the fancy glasses.
But we had a champagne moment. The champagne theory is back.
Champagne theory is back in action. One last thought is the concession stand. So when I worked in New York, I did have one of those snack stands, and I didn't frequent it that much because it was on like the other side of our building where elevators didn't go down, so I wasn't as tempted when I walked by. But last night, I mean, it's nothing new for me, but I was like really craving chocolate, and we have like no desserts in our house because we finished them all last week. And that scene came up, and I was like, really? They don't have any food this whole movie, and they're going to show me the one thing that I'm craving right now that I can't have.
Yeah, I stuck my hand in the bag of Sour Patch Kids and had another few.
I could see you guys having like a good home theater snack selection.
We don't watch movies too often together on our big TV, so I knew we were going to do it in advance. So I went to the grocery store and picked up some snacks.
Nice. Okay, so our dinner party is going to be fun this week. So Jimmy, if you listen to some of our episodes, we usually host a little dinner party on this podcast. So we're going to go with our kind of classic approach here. We're each going to give each other a character. And Michelle, what are you thinking? I think we do potluck.
I like potluck.
Potluck holiday party style. So, Jimmy, I'll give you a character, and you're going to tell me what they would bring to the potluck Christmas party. You give Michelle a character. She's going to do the same. Michelle will give me one. So let's start with you. We are going to let's bring Carl back from the dead. He's going to, the holiday Christmas party as Carl. He's not a terrorist. He's coming, hanging out, there for some laughs. What is he going to bring to the Christmas party?
If we're talking about the character Carl, he's probably going to bring like a bratwurst and some sauerkraut on maybe a good toasted hoagie.
Nice. What about making those into some bites? Like mini brats?
Yeah, mini brats. I mean, I said hoagie, but where we grew up, we called them wedges.
Ooh. What about some spicy brown mustard? Will that be included?
Definitely need. I mean, spicy brown mustard's a given, and not stone Dijon mustard. I mean, spicy brown. Spicy brown's the way to go.
Nice. Oh, God.
And would he bring a drink, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think that he's probably going to take whatever the party has already, and he's going to probably partake in the punch.
Okay.
If he's in his terrorist mode, then he knows he can't be under the influence because he's already the weakest link.
Of all the terrorists, he
He's
seems
from
to
too.
be the least clothed too, so he seems very simple.
Yeah, he's a simple man.
I hope he
He might
doesn't
not.
spill his mustard.
He might not bring sauerkraut, but I hope he does.
All right, you have to give Michelle someone.
Well, Michelle, I think you probably know I'm going to give you Ellis. So you could bring Ellis to the party. What's he bringing?
Oh,
What a
God.
shame.
Ellis.
I mean, I guess we're going with all dead characters.
Okay. I think that Ellis is the type of guy who never cooks, but has like one thing that he's really good at making or says that he's really good at making it. And he brings it to like every single event and then brags about it. So I think that he's going to bring, I feel like it has to be something that's like really, really easy to make. How about one of those? I don't know why this is coming to mind, and I don't know. I consider this to be more of like a 90s thing than an 80s thing, but maybe it originated in the 80s. One of those like 7-layer taco
Michelle,
dips.
I was literally thinking that in my when you said like something, I was like, she's gonna say 7-layer dip. She's gonna say 7-layer dip. I wanted to like jump out of the screen and say it before you did.
Like you said, cut from the same mold.
I mean, 7-layer dips. We gotta bring them back.
We do. They are good.
They are so good. It's
Are we-
sour cream. It's beans.
Are we allowed to refute?
You don't think that Ellis would make a 7-layer dip?
I think
I
he would.
think Ellis would make deviled eggs and put caviar on top because he likes to show off. I don't know that 7-layer dip is showy enough for Ellis.
He eats caviar, but
Yeah.
he doesn't make caviar.
I don't think that he can actually afford it, even though he says that he makes like $1 million deals. I have a feeling it's a lot more like for show than.
Someone
But
who makes $1 million deals doesn't say that they make $1 million deals. So
He bought Holly a Rolex. Probably used the company card.
probably. But I could see deviled eggs as something else he would bring. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna go with the dip and chips, and I have a feeling he'll also like. He won't just bring like a bag of chips. Like he'll also bring like his own bowl and then brag about that too. Maybe it's like a bowl that he got as a like a crystal bowl that he got as a like a client gift from someone, and then he'll use that as an opportunity to also brag. And will he bring a drink? I don't know. What do you guys think? Would he bring like an expensive bottle of wine and then
I don't think so.
mansplain it? Or
I think that he just spikes the punch with some cocaine
okay,
and calls it a day.
okay. Oh, the cocaine is also really in alignment with the 7-layer dip. I'm feeling
Yeah.
even more solid about this.
Yeah, I can see him being like coked out and making that in his kitchen.
Yeah,
Spilling some in the 7-layer dip.
that's
He's
one
like
of the
never
8th layer.
used his oven before. Like the cheese is not melted because he didn't know how to turn it on. He's like, it's part of the recipe. I don't melt my cheese. It's just how it is. It's a cold dip.
All right.
Actually,
If the dip has
7-layer
cocaine,
dips. 7-layer dips. Some of them are unmelted cheese. Some are cold.
Some are cold.
So is this a hot one or a cold one?
I don't know, but isn't one of the layers like a
sour
meat,
cream.
like a cooked meat?
Oh my god, I need a 7-layer dip
if it's
immediately.
cold, count me out.
Okay,
I feel like it's a
Lisa
mix of
immediately
hot
after
and
this.
cold. I think that the meat and like maybe the beans have to be hot, but then like this, I would not put like a sour cream layer and a guac layer in the oven.
Yeah. I feel like guac is usually to the side. But I'm confused because I feel like you wouldn't put the sour cream in the oven,
No, you
but
wouldn't.
you would put the cheese. So maybe
If
it
the
is a
cheese
cold.
isn't melted, I send it back.
Sometimes I feel like a lot of times it's unmelted cheese on top, and it's not good. This is how I would do it. I would do beans, meat. You know, I love olives, but I'm getting rid of the olives. I
don't know
think
anything
it
about
adds...
7-layer dip. Do you just pick your own ingredients? You're just like, this is I'm gonna have a turkey layer, I'm gonna have a stuffing layer, and then I'm gonna have like buffalo sauce layer, or
No, it's
like
supposed to
more
be
of
like
a...
Mexican,
Yeah.
American Mexican.
Mexican
Wait,
American, yeah.
one more.
So,
A memory of someone who used to make this when we were kids had a layer of cream cheese in it.
I would think it goes beans, meat, like a ground meat with some taco seasoning, mixed with onion, topped with melted cheese. So you get all the hot out. And then before you serve, you're going to do a layer of sour cream on top of the cheese, but the cheese has to be like a little hot, like lukewarm. Pico de gallo, so like a mix of like a tomato and cilantro, some lime juice, and then how many is that?
I think it's only 5.
And then we're also gonna have some guac, and I don't know what the 7th layer. Maybe I'm changing it to a six layer dip.
Well, you took out the olives. I think the olives could be a layer.
Olives add nothing because they're always the canned olives. They're not good. If it was like a good olive, all right. Listeners, we want to know what your ideal 7-layer dip order is. And is the cheese hot or cold? We must know because Ellis is no longer with us to tell us so.
All right, Laura, you ready for your assignment?
I am.
All right, I'm going to give you Dwayne T. Robinson.
Oh, God. He's a TV dinner guy. He does not cook. He has never operated an oven. I think if he's married, he doesn't mention her. But if he is, I think that his wife, like, doesn't really know how to cook either, but she does the cooking. So I think he would show up with, like, a crock pot of chili. Even though this is more of like a Super Bowl themed and not holiday, but maybe, like, his wife puts on a crock pot of chili and she makes like some cornbread, boxed cornbread. Is it Jif? What is the
Jiffy?
Jiffy cornbread. That's what I'm thinking. And I think he brings like a 6-pack of beers for himself and doesn't share and drinks all of them and then like harasses his people who work under him. Feels right.
All that checks out for me.
Wow, this is really a white trash. I mean, aside from Carl, Carl's showing up.
Yeah, these are crappy yes.
Honestly, I kind of want to be at this holiday party though.
Because you would want the sausage and you want the bean dip without the cocaine.
Yeah.
I would eat the Jiffy cornbread.
I would eat the Jiffy cornbread. but only, sometimes it could be a little dry.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes.
You need to make sure that there's a lot of butter. He's bringing butter with him.
Jimmy, it took us so long to get you to come on the podcast. So now that you've been with us for an episode, if you were going to come back for another movie, what would you pick?
Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. Or Beverly Hills Cop if you haven't done it, but I think you've done it.
No, we haven't.
No.
Okay, those are both solid options, and then you can do a lot of explaining for us with Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I was going to say, perfect. Come on for Indiana Jones, and you can explain the movie to us, and we'll talk about the costumes and call it a day.
Maybe we could do a season of, like, third movies.
Ooh.
Because it's Indiana Jones 3 is his favorite one. And we could, Back to the Future 3 is also his favorite of the Back to the Future trilogies.
Maybe you and Dom will have to come on for that one. So the holiday season, we're going to make it a little less bloody coming up. We are going to have another guest on, and we're going to be taking this way back in time. Probably the polar opposite of Die Hard. And we are going to be covering the one, the only, It's a Wonderful Life. So stay tuned. Get ready for a lot of wholesome content.
Can't wait.